welcome to this author interaction of the NLF Reading Challenge 2023. My name is Samantha and I hope you are as excited as I am to be here today. Before we begin the interaction, let me give you a brief introduction about the NLF Reading Challenge, followed by a few housekeeping rules for today's session. The NLF Reading Challenge is a 3-month-long reading event from July to October 2023 for students between grades 4 to 6. It runs on the competitive as well as the non-competitive tracks. For the challenge, students read their way through a curated set of 30 books. They discuss their reading with their friends and their guide, log their thoughts, and get to interact with the authors of some of these books. The challenge will conclude with a quiz competition that will see the 3 best teams win gold, silver, and bronze engraved trophies, certificates of achievement, and a wonderful set of books. For today's event, please use the Q&A box to type out your questions or your responses to what's being discussed during the session. If you're a student, a teacher, or a school librarian, please mention the name of your school along with your question as well. In fact, if you already have your questions ready, please feel free to type them out. Today, we're privileged to have with us the popular and incredibly talented author, Varsha Seshan. Varsha is a children's writer, twice shortlisted for the Scholastic Asian Book Award. She has written numerous books and stories for children and facilitates a writers' club for preteens at a school in Pune where she lives. Her book, The Clockwala's Clues, was shortlisted for the NEE Book Award 2021 in the Emerging Readers category. Additionally, she is a classical dancer with over 25 years of training in Bharatanatyam. Today, she is here to speak with us about her middle grade novel, Sisters at New Dawn, that is thought-provoking and humorous in equal measure. Welcome, Varsha. We are very happy to have you with us today.
Hi, Samantha. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Would you want to begin the session by reading from the book, Varsha, before we jump into the Q&A segment?
Sure, I'd love to do that. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction because I don't want to read from the beginning. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read a section that's kind of in the first third of the book. So it's in chapter 8. And it's a moment when Carnegie confronts her father because her father never told her that he was in the same school as he's put them in. So he never told her that he was in New Dawn as well. So she's angry, she's upset. New Dawn is nothing like she imagined it would be. And I'm just going to read the section where she talks to him about it. Unfortunately, there's no internet, so she has to talk to him on an old-fashioned phone. I stomped out and picked up the receiver. You were at New Dawn for 4 years and you didn't tell us? I said, without greeting Appa. There was silence. Hello? I don't know why Tata had to tell you that, said Appa finally, sounding annoyed. Why not? I asked. Why is it a secret anyway? I could imagine Appa shaking his head in that way of his. I promise there's a reason why I didn't tell you. What reason? Trust me, please. I will tell you as soon as I can. What did that mean? Kanna, do you really hate New Dawn after just a week there? I don't know, I muttered. Then give it a chance, baby, please. For me, it's a place I loved. Okay, could you do that? I nodded and then remembered he couldn't see me. Okay, I said. Thank you, and I miss both of you. I love you, I said. My eyes were still wet. Wait, talk to Amma. Feeling better, Kanna? Amma's calm voice came through the receiver. A little. Anytime you want, just give me a missed call from Tata's phone, okay? And Kanna, remember that you don't have to stay there, okay? Just see whether you like it. If you don't, we'll find another place, another school. Appa and I will move back to India if we need to. Okay. And take care of each other. Yes, Amma. I chose to read that section because I think that's what the whole book is about family and about relationships.
Yeah, thank you, Varsha, for that lovely reading. You really do bring the angst and the love and all the rage that even the rage that Carnegie had, you really do bring all of that alive.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. So let's jump right into the questions that we have prepared for you while we wait for the audience questions to come in. Okay. So many readers associate boarding school stories with children's literature from the West. Sisters at New Dawn, as you just said, is about familial relationships, it's about friendship, it's about education, among many other things. But it is the promise of midnight parties and house competitions that lends it a wonderful color. Was this a conscious decision to have a middle school drama that is set in our local cultural milieu? And how did your own childhood reading influence the writing of the book?
So the answer to the first question is yes. It was a conscious decision to write a book about children at a boarding school in our cultural milieu. And my childhood definitely shaped the way I wrote it, because just like Carnegie and Padma in the story, I grew up on Enid Blyton, St. Clair's, Harry Potter. And as you phrased it perfectly, midnight parties and sneaking out of your dormitory and all of that is part of the stories that we've read. And at the same time, I also taught in a boarding school. So I knew a little bit more about how it was there. And there was a lot that was happening in a boarding school, which really wasn't part of our stories. So I was teaching at a boarding school here, and there were children who were maybe in class 4 who were already in boarding. And that did shape the writing of the story in many ways, because what we know of a boarding school from the outside, if it's only Western, it's not going to read as an authentic story, because I've never been to boarding school myself. So what right do I have to write about a child in a boarding school and how that's going to be? But also, I think it's worth pointing out that through the book, Carnegie and Padma aren't really in boarding school, because it was not a story that I felt was yet mine to tell. I needed a lot more research, because I couldn't write a story about the Indian boarding school based on Mallory Towers and St. Clair's. So yes, I decided to write it in India, but I decided to take it slowly. So if I decide to write another book set in New Dawn, then I will put them into the boarding school and do a lot more research. But having said that, at this stage, I wanted just to try to touch upon things that captivated me as a child, the joy of boarding school, the kind of adventure that we associate with boarding school. I think that's what I wanted.
Okay, thanks, Varsha, for that response. It's a very thoughtful answer.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our next question. And this is a longish 2-part question, I will warn you. The book, as the title suggests, is about 2 sisters, Carnegie and Padma, who are each other's cheerleaders. Padma and Carnegie take pride in each other's accomplishments and achievements. Padma and Carnegie look out for each other, and it is often Carnegie, the younger sister, who takes on the role of the protective one. And you have dedicated this book to your own sister, writing, "For my sister Nisha, because sisters are special." How did your dynamics with your sister influence the characterization of Padma and Carnegie? And did your sister read the book? And if yes, how did she respond to it? That's the first part of the question. And the next thing that struck me while I was reading the book is that the book was very heavily rooted in familial love. The girl's parents and Tata are crucial to the story, and I especially love Tata because he's always associated with food in the book. And therefore, it feels like the book is coming from a place of memories and nostalgia and memories of your own childhood spent with your family. Am I justified in feeling that? Did you draw from your own childhood and family when you were writing the book?
So before I answer it, let me say the question is so thoughtful. I love how you phrased it. I love how much you thought about the book. And so the first part of the question about sisters. So anybody who knows the both of us and has read the book has very clearly said, well, Carnegie is Varsha and Padma is Nisha. So to say that our dynamics influenced the book is just a very tiny part of it. So I am the younger one. My sister is older than I am. And just like Carnegie and Padma, people said that we looked alike, and we didn't really see that. So in the book, they're teased as non-twins, and they're twins, not twins. This is a conversation that we had our whole lives. And even today, even though now I don't really, at least I feel I don't look like my sister Nisha at all. So she's a French teacher, but more than once I've had people coming up to me and saying, bonjour, And I'm like, I'm the wrong one, but sure, bonjour. That's all I will say to you. But let's not take this any further than this. So yes, our dynamics do find their way into the book. And just like Carnegie, I am very protective of Nisha. So it's really very similar in many ways. And yes, she's read my book, and she hasn't just read this one. She's read practically everything that I've written, because, like you said, Padma and Carnegie are each other's biggest cheerleaders. It's the same. So we are each other's biggest cheerleaders, and we really we support each other in whatever way that we can. So it's our dynamic that finds its way into the book in many ways. So that's the first part. To come to the second part of the question about familial love, I was a very lucky child in so much that I knew all four of my grandparents very, very well. So I lost my first grandparent when I was 25. So I had a childhood with four grandparents, which I enjoyed tremendously, because I had one set of grandparents in Pune where I lived, and another set of grandparents whom I used to visit in my holidays. So yes, there was a very strong association of family with, of course, food, with time, with love. And yes, there's a sense of nostalgia, but at the same time, it's something that I love seeing around me when children bond with their parents as well as their grandparents. When I see families together, it's something that makes me very happy. So it's something that I've tried to put into the book as well.
Thanks so much for sharing all this with us. Varsha. Yeah, and now an audience question has come in, which is related to this question. The audience asks, in your book, Sisters in New Dawn, Carnegie is shown as an aggressive character who always talks for her sister. However, Padma is shown as a quiet and innocent character. The differences make them best friends. Does Padma dislike Carnegie taking hold of her?
No. So that's the short answer. So Padma doesn't dislike it at all. Padma is happy about it, because sometimes you need someone to champion you if you feel if the person knows what you want and you're nervous about taking a stand yourself. So for example, even when Padma is bullied, she doesn't know what to do about it, and Carnegie kind of extracts a promise from her that she'll talk about it. And that's the first step, because if you don't talk about being bullied, you continue to feel isolated. And with their parents so far away, it's important for them to be together. So Carnegie speaks for her, because she knows that in some ways Padma wants to speak but is too scared. And Carnegie is a little bit of a firecracker, and she speaks all the time, but it comes from a place of care. And Padma is loving and caring enough not to resent her for it.
Yeah, I'm sure that answers the audience question. We'll move on to the next audience question. It's from Jyoti Kanjur, a librarian at Ballistis International School, Bangalore. I would like to ask Varsha the following question. Which LCA would she have chosen if she were a student at New Dawn? And I have a related question for you. Is it New Dawn something that strikes you immediately when you start reading the book? Is that New Dawn is a school that's very different. It's whimsical, and especially when seen through the eyes of Carnegie, it's hilarious. And at New Dawn, students learn subjects that are designated as HCAs, or high chances of application subjects, and LCAs, or low chances of application subjects, and even subjects called pot of gold and math and beauty. Students teach some classes and go as far as addressing teachers by their first names. So how did the idea of a school such as New Dawn come about, and how did you envision it when you started writing the book? And you also conduct teacher training programs and reading and writing programs for children. So how has this contributed to your understanding of schools and education? And did it influence the ways in which you were drawing up New Dawn?
So let me answer the first question first, which is which LCA would I choose? I would choose maths and beauty. I love math, and I think very often people say that in the arts, people who go into the arts don't enjoy maths. I'm sorry, no way. I love maths. I love arithmetic. I love geometry. I love algebra. I love the work. So it's something that I've always enjoyed. And I think mathematics and art go together. So if you look it up a bit, you'll see things like the golden ratio. You'll see, even as the teacher there in Maths and Beauty explains, we know beats. If a beat doesn't finish properly, we feel disturbed. This is because math and beauty do go together. So they're tied in ways that we don't always notice, but they're very involved with each other. And that's definitely the LCA that I would choose. Coming to what you asked about, how I thought of the school and where it came from, for me, I think I love the idea of alternative kinds of learning. So, especially because I conduct book clubs and I conduct writing programs, I feel I have the space to explore teaching methodologies, which often teachers in most schools don't have the space to explore, simply because my class size is never more than 9, which is a tiny class. This is not possible in a school, right? In a school, we're looking at 30. Sometimes 70. So we have huge classrooms. And I think that for me, working with a small group allows me to connect with each child, each student in a way that you can't if you have a large classroom. And right through my career teaching, I think I've encountered so many different kinds of teaching. So people talk about activity-based learning, people talk about the higher order thinking skills, people talk about experiential learning. And I've worked with all of these in terms of the terminology. So I've worked with the terminology, but at the same time, I think bringing the terminology into practice isn't as impossible as it sometimes seems, because it's just a matter of linking a fact with the skill. So sometimes I ask teachers as well, how many times have you used algebra in your life? And my answer is, I've never used algebra in my life, and not after class 12. So I didn't do algebra. But at the same time, what is it that algebra teaches us? It teaches us the skill of sorting out information, right? So for example, I can't do x plus y. I can do x plus 2x, because that information goes together. So when we start thinking from the point of view of skills rather than facts, I think we can approach education in a way that is much more exciting, much more engaging for learners in general. And that is what I had in mind when I began to create New Dawn, because they have all kinds of projects. They have a lot of things that they do rather than learn. So they're doing things. So whether it's the terrarium that Padma's group makes, whatever it is, they're doing things, gardening, farming. And I think this was something that I wanted to bring into my understanding of the education system, that it's not really about the exam. It's about how you can express yourself and how you can learn in a way that's enjoyable for you and for everybody around you.
Right. Thanks for that, Varsha. And since you have been talking about your experience in schools and with students, I have a question from Siddharth, who used to be a part of your writing workshop. He's a student from Ikea Schools in JP Nagar, Bangalore. And he wants to ask you how he got the idea about adding characters who were adopted. And I have a related question, where in an article on Sisters at New Dawn, you have written that the book makes you happy because the story is not about adoption anymore. You wrote, and I quote, "What needs to be normalized feels normalized, and what should not be normalized is not." And we know that you talk to adoptive parents to understand what goes into adoption and raising adopted children. So could you tell us a little bit about this research and the multiple narratives around adoption that became evident to you while you were having these conversations, and how did that help define the book Sisters at New Dawn?
So for this, I owe my gratitude to my editor, Ishani. So she's an exceptional editor. So in an initial draft of Sisters at New Dawn, I did have the girls not knowing that they were adopted and finding out towards the end. So this was an earlier draft. But Ishani kept saying, there's something that I feel is missing in the story. There's something that I feel we need to do differently. And it took a while for us to get there. But she said, the problem is that adoption and everything around adoption has been trivialized to become just another plot twist. And if you're looking at a story which accepts adoption as something that is normal, we need to normalize it from the beginning. And this is when I started talking to parents about how they've spoken to their children, what goes into telling a child that they've been adopted. So I spoke about the terminology that parents use with very young children. So from things like tummy baby and heart baby to, for example, even Carnegie says real parents, and that's a term that we need to break, because who are your real parents? And that's the reason why we make that distinction between biological parents and adoptive parents. No one is more or less real. So all of this kind of went into the telling of the story as I started reworking it, because I agreed entirely with Ishani that having the adoption reveal as a plot twist or at the end is overdone. It's something that we've seen in television, we've seen in books all our lives. It's like your world has changed because I'm adopted. And this is not a step towards making it normal, or it's not a step towards accepting that, well, different kinds of families exist. And I loved the feedback that Ishani gave me. It made me dive deeper and research into how adoption takes place. And to answer Siddharth's question, I think adoption was something that I did want to write about in multiple ways, because it's sometimes hidden so easily. Like, at the same, while accepting that you don't need to tell somebody I am adopted by, I mean, you're a daughter, a son, however, at the same time, I think it's nice for it to be so normal that it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make any difference. And that is what led me to tell a story of adoption. And the research really helped, and the feedback from Ishani really helped.
Thanks for that, Varsha. Now that we're talking about families, I'll take you back to another question about families. In the book, it is Tata who cooks idlis and sambar and upma and whatnot for the girls. It is Tata that takes the girls to school every day. And these are roles that are usually associated with the party or the grandmother. Was breaking this gender role a conscious decision? And I'm also asking this because for Carnegie's project, she envisions the Great Flood as a power struggle between two goddesses, Goddess Mazu, a Chinese goddess, and Goddess Frigg, a Norse goddess. So the myths and stories that we grew up with are often retold today to put characters who are ignored due to their caste, class, gender, and so on center stage. So as a reader and a writer, are you interested in reading, telling and retelling stories that accommodate an inclusive worldview that values all equally?
So let me answer the first question first. Was it a conscious decision to make Tata, to break the gender stereotype when I make Tata make food for the children? Yes, it was. It was a conscious decision in so much that I wanted to embrace a space where the grandfather can take care of not just himself, but also his grandchildren. And I liked the space that it created, because both my grandfathers, even though neither of them cooked, both of them were really fond of food. So I felt that if they were brought up differently, I think they would have enjoyed cooking as well. I don't feel that they wouldn't, because they enjoyed their food. They enjoyed their idli and their sambar, and they relished what they ate. So I thought, why not? It would be nice for you to, even fictionally, be given the opportunity to create this for grandchildren. So yes, that was a conscious decision that I made. But at the same time, I would say that while I like reading stories which are inclusive, and I love diverse stories, but at the same time, when the agenda is stronger than the story, I find that I don't enjoy the story so much. So for me, story is always paramount. So yes, I look for inclusive literature. I want to see representation. But at the same time, in a book, I don't want a moral of the story. I don't want what did you learn from this story? And I don't want a very politically correct story which necessarily ticks multiple checkboxes, because I feel then that the priority becomes ticking the checkboxes rather than telling an engaging story. So I would say, yes, I am always a conscious writer. I do try to see what I can do to be inclusive. But at the same time, I think I'm aware of my privilege, and I know that I live in a bubble and there are a lot of stories that aren't mine to tell. So while recognizing that perhaps other voices are not heard, I cannot speak for someone else. I can attempt to talk to other people and perhaps help to find a voice. But if a story is not mine to tell, I don't have the right to tell it. So this is something that I feel I'm conscious of as well. I need to be careful of what I do. And I typically shy away from retellings because I think there are enough retellings that exist. It's not my forte, so it's not something that I would do. But to tell a story that is inclusive is important. But at the same time, inclusion for the sake of inclusion without in-depth research causes more damage than good.
Thanks for sharing that, Varsha. It helps us understand you more as a writer.
Thank you.
So Varsha, we're about 4 minutes away from ending the session. So I'll ask you our last question. A question has come in from Vriddhi Sethia, who has asked, which was the most special part in the book for you, and why was it important? And what we want to ask you is that you had a long journey with this book. You wrote it first in 2014 and finally had it published in 2020. You have written about the moment when you received the hard copy of the book from your editor, Ishani, and you wrote that it felt like you reached the end of your journey with this book. So how has this journey been? What is your dynamics with this particular book?
Okay, so what do I have a part of the book that I like the most? That's very hard to say, but I think what makes me a writer is also what makes me a reader. I always ask myself, do I want to make my reader cry or do I want to make them laugh? And the answer is always both. I want to try to do both. I want to make my reader laugh and cry. And I think the parts which are which do this, which are intense, are my favorite parts. Whether it's the hilarious episode with the pot of gold class, or it's a more serious section when Carnegie and Padma have a conversation about bullying, both are equally special to me. And that to choose one part of the book that I like more than the rest, that's a bit hard. But in terms of the journey of the book, yes, 6 years is a long time for it to be in the making. But like I said, I worked with Ishani a lot on the book. So after I wrote it, in any case, the process of publication in general is slow. But at the same time, after I wrote it, I did work on it a lot. So both on my own, I'm not a writer, I'm a rewriter. I write and then it's got no value really, because it's not connected ideas and it's just a first draft which was hastily written. So I need to go back because I don't plan my story, I don't plot, I just write. And then I have to rewrite the whole thing. So I had my first draft ready in 2014, but it took a while before I was ready to send it out to publishers. And even once I sent it out, there was a lot of work that I did with Ishani on the book, on developing it, on making it, on word choice, on very small things that I think I wanted to make better. And Ishani was willing to do that with me. So working with her was lovely as well. Also, Zuban is a very small team, so things took much longer than they would with a larger publisher. But I enjoyed the process, and I think it's hard to say that it's one of my favorite books, but I know that it's one of the books that I worked hardest on. So I really like how the book ultimately turned out. And I love that I was able to express so much through this story in terms of family dynamics, in terms of bullying, in terms of a new idea for an education system, which I hope provides hope.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Varsha. We are at the end of our session. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. This has been a wonderful session, and we wish you all the very best with all your upcoming work and eagerly look forward to reading it.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Thank you for having me here. And thank you to all the participants for having been so active.
It's our pleasure. Thanks, Varsha.
Bye-bye.
Bye.